Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare, Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Hare Krishna. Hare Ram Sankirtan ki jai. So we'll discuss today Bhagavad Gita verse 2.60. So I'll just recite, you can repeat after me. Yatato hi api kaunteya purushasya vipaschitah indriyani pramathini haranti prasabham mana. Yatato hi api kaunteya purushasya vipaschitah indriyani pramathini haranti prasabham mana. Yatato hi api kaunteya purushasya vipaschitah indriyani pramathini haranti prasabham mana.
Yatato hi api kaunteya purushasya vipaschitah indriyani pramatini haranti prasabham manah.
Yatato hi api kaunteya
purushasya vipaschitah indriyani pramathini haranti prasabham manah. Anyone else? Yatato hi api kaunteya purushasya vipaschitah indriyani pramathini haranti prasabham manah. Read the word to word meanings. Yatataha, while endeavoring, he, certainly, api, in spite of, kaunteya, O son of Kunti, purushasya, of a man, vipaschita, full of discriminating knowledge, indriyani, the senses, pramathini, agitating, haranti, through, prasabham, by force, mana, the mind. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. Purport. There are many learned sages, philosophers and transcendentalists who try to conquer the senses, but in spite of their endeavors, even the greatest of them sometimes fall victim to material sense enjoyment due to the agitated mind. Even Vishwamitra, a great sage and perfect yogi, was misled by Menaka into sex enjoyment, although the yogi was endeavoring for sense control with severe type of penances and yoga practice. And of course, there are so many similar instances in the history of the world. Therefore, it is very difficult to control the mind and the senses without being fully Krishna conscious. Without engaging the mind in Krishna, one cannot see such material engagements. A practical example is given by Sri Yamunacharya, a great saint and devotee who says, Yad abadhi mama cheta Krishna pada ravinde nava rasa dhamani udyatam rantum asit tad abadhi batanari sangame smaryamane bhavati mukha vikara shushtu nishtivam vinamcha. Since my mind has been engaged in the service of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, and I have been enjoying an ever new transcendental humor, whenever I think of sex life with a woman, my face at once turns from it and I spit at the thought. Krishna consciousness is such a transcendently nice thing that automatically material enjoyment becomes tasteful. It is as if a hungry man had satisfied his hunger by sufficient quantity of nutritious eatables. Maharaj Amrish also conquered a great yogi, Durvasa Muni, simply because his mind was engaged in Krishna consciousness. Savai mana Krishna pada ravandayor vacham si vaikuntha gunanuvarnani. Hare Krishna. We'll just recite the Mangalacharan prayers. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Nama Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakavalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Iti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Vishesha Shunyavadi Paschat Deshatarine Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prem Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gaurtushe Nama He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vindavaneshwari Vishbhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpataro Besha Kripa Sindhu Behevacha Patita Nam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Nama Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram. Hare Krishna. So in the course of our discussion, today we are going to discuss Bhagavad Gita verse 2.60. So every day we cover certain sets of verses and we see the deeper aspects of it and we see the practical applications. How Bhagavad Gita can be relevant in our day-to-day lives, how we can actually practically apply these teachings in our day-to-day life. Because many times people ask, like, this Bhagavad Gita was spoken 5,000 years ago. How it is relevant right now? How does it make sense? Because that time the situations were different. That time even war used to happen with bows and arrows and a different kind of atmosphere, and now it's all different. So how actually the Bhagavad Gita is relevant, how we can use the teachings, and how the principles still remain the same. Though the things may be different, the external situations may be different, but the principles of the Bhagavad Gita still remain the same. So this is what we'll discuss today. So I'll just give a brief background. So before this verse, there was a discussion going on between, as everyone knows, there was a discussion going on between Arjuna and Krishna. And they are on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So now on the battlefield, Arjuna was bewildered. Arjuna was bewildered that what should be done. Should I fight with the Kauravas? Should I fight or should I not fight? Because he saw his relatives, his grandparents, all his different kinds of relatives, all his nobles. And he gave a list of reasons. That was we discussed in the first chapter. So basically he gave a list of reasons why he should not fight. Why Arjuna should not fight the battlefield. And then finally he was bewildered, finally he was confused. So in Bhagavad Gita verse 2.7, he says to Krishna, he says that Prachami Tvam Dharma Sammuda Chetaha. Basically he says that I am bewildered. Dharma Sammuda Chetaha basically means I am bewildered, I don't know what should be done, what is the right thing for me to do. And that's why he approaches Krishna, that's why he approaches a guru, that's why he asks him that you tell me what is the right thing that needs to be done. And then in the series of verses that goes on after that, we see that in the verses from 11 to 30, Krishna describes various aspects of the body and soul. how he describes that how we are actually spiritual beings, and we are spiritual beings, we are eternal. So as Arjuna was giving the logic that if I kill them, sin will incur us. So Krishna tells them that sin can only incur us when you kill somebody, but the soul is eternal. Soul never dies. And that's why in the Bhagavad Gita 2.13, very famous shloka, it says, Dehino yasmin yatha dehe, tatha kaumaram yauvanam jara, tatha dehantaram prapti, dhiras tatra na mohyate. Like similar to our body, which undergoes several changes, like once we were young, and then we become youth, then we become old. Similar to that, our soul actually changes one body to another. Now, no one is bewildered by such a change, right? No one grows up and he's bewildered, oh, I've grown up, everything has changed. Everyone knows this is bound to happen. Similarly, Krishna tells Arjuna that how the soul is bound to change from one body to another. And that's just a normal thing. There is no big deal. The soul keeps on traversing from one body to another. And it was described very clearly that how, just like we change our clothes, just like one clothes gets weared and teared and then we change different sets of clothes. Similarly, at the end of our life, when the death comes, we change our bodies. And that's not a big deal. That's not a very big thing. Because we are eternal spiritual beings. So this technically, Krishna was talking to Arjuna about the Sankhya Yoga philosophy, the yoga philosophy which understands different analysis of the body and the soul. How we are not this body, how we are the spirit souls, and how the body is comprised of different elements. That's what Krishna tells Arjuna in those verses from 11 to 30. And then after that, Krishna starts describing him different aspects of the Bhakti Yoga or Buddhi Yoga feature. How different people who are advanced in consciousness, they are not bewildered by such a change. They are not affected. They know that this is going to happen, this is bound to happen, and they are not affected. So now the words previous to these, before few verses, Arjuna asked Krishna that what are the symptoms of such a person? How can we understand that a person is advanced in consciousness? What are his symptoms? How does he sit? How does he walk? No, of course, that it does not mean literally how does he sit. Basically, how does he actually controls himself from different sense objects? And how does he walk means how does he behave? How does he engages in different activities? This is what Arjuna has asked to Krishna. And then Krishna is telling Arjuna all these set of verses. That what are the symptoms of a sthita pragya, or a person fixed in consciousness, person who is advanced in consciousness. So just prior to this verse, that was verse number 2.59, the last class yesterday we discussed, how sometimes people try to artificially restrain themselves. People try to take some artificial resolutions, sometimes they take New Year resolutions, sometimes they take different kinds of resolutions to refrain from certain activities, which they know are wrong for them, which they know are not good for them. But then they are not able to continue it in for a long time. They are not able to stay fixed in it. And that's why in the previous verse, Prabhupada very nicely gives the example of a deceased person. Just like a deceased person is asked to refrain from certain items. If he may be suffering from a health issue, he's asked to refrain, they don't take oily food, don't take spicy food. But the moment because the desire, the craving is there, he may refrain for some time. But the moment he gets healthy, he'll just go to the favorite restaurant of his choice and just hog like anything. So point is, basically, these artificially restraining something or artificially avoiding something doesn't help. Unless we get fixed up in some higher consciousness or higher taste. Just like we can take the example of a child. A child very much inclined, like a very naughty child, very much inclined to break things here and there. So you artificially stop him, he'll stop for some time and then again he'll start engaging in those things. But then you give him some better engagement, you give him something to play or some nice thing, like those building blocks or something. Then he'll keep on engaging in that and he won't unnecessarily disturb. So similarly, when we get something higher, when we get something which is better in value, we'll automatically give up the lower things. This is what the previous verse we discussed. And there we discussed one more thing, that there is a difference between our words and our actions. Many times people say so many things. People in this world say so many things that I'll do this, I'll try to do this, or I'll put this in action. But then with time we see they're not able to do this. They are not fixed on their words. They don't have that much resolution and they don't have that much faith in those things. So why is it that people say something but do something else? So is it because we are all hypocritical, or we are just making something, saying something, but we are not able to follow? Or is it something else? So at some times it is possible people are hypocritic also. They may say some things they won't do. But then there is another thing, if we deeply analyze, that is the lack of deep conviction. Lack of deep conviction to not do something. Lack of deep conviction to actually avoid certain things. Deep faith, why we should actually not do these things and why we should engage in something higher. Because of that conviction missing, people tend to engage in many abominable acts, many sinful things, which they also know that they shouldn't do. So now, in this verse, which is very amazing verse, here the description which Krishna is talking to Arjuna is about the senses. That how the senses, so I'll just read the proper translation again. How the senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind even of a man of great discrimination. So here what he is talking about is a person who knows what is right and wrong, who knows, who has read something, who wants to follow something, who is a man of discrimination. He's not talking about someone who doesn't know, who doesn't care, but a man of discrimination who is trying to do certain things, trying to avoid certain things. Even he is bewildered by the senses. And that's why he says senses are so strong and impetuous. So we see in all our spiritual scriptures, the senses are compared to just like being snakes. Just like we see the behavior of the snakes, which is enviousness. Whenever we see snakes, the first thing we say is they are always envious. Why? Because no matter how well we treat them, even if a person, let's say he takes a snake as a pet, he feeds him milk and anything, their nature is to bite. Anything you do, they'll anyways bite. They'll anyways harm you. They'll anyways be poisonous and they can anyways harm you. They're never harmless. And especially we see this in practical in foreign countries, people do even these things, but they're always careful. Even if they've taken pet snakes, they're always careful of those, that they can bite at any time. So similarly, our senses are also compared to this analogy. Just like a snake bites at some place and the poison spreads throughout the body, similar to that, our senses are also said that they can also inject the poison. And what is that poison? Of unmotivated and unprovoked cravings in us. Unprovoked desires to do something which we know is wrong, which we know is not correct for us. And yet the desire will come, yet the tendency we won't be able to stop. In spite of knowing that this is not correct for us. And that is what can kill us, kill all our spiritual endeavors or all our spiritual knowledge. Once we drive away or once we take those paths or when we do those things, that kills our spiritual knowledge. So that's why senses are very much compared to these poisonous snakes. And there are very much, so many examples for this we try to see. Just like we see in the water, the fish. How the fish is caught. Now there are so many things, if we just analyze, there are so many things in the water, so many eatables. But yet a person who puts a bait, puts some piece of cheese and the fish goes after it. Just to satisfy one of its senses, that is the tongue, it falls into the bait and then the person just pulls it out and then it dies. We see the example of deer. How the deers are caught, so it's very interesting. Like a hunter goes to the forest and it sings, like it plays some beautiful melody. And the deer, just by hearing some nice sound, it goes after it. And that's how he lays a trap and the deer is caught in it. So now the deer gets caught by another senses, that is the ear. Then we see the example of the bumblebee. So the bumblebee always goes to the lotus flower because it has this thing of smell. Very nice smelling lotus flower. It wants to take that fragrance more and more. But sometimes we analyze that the lotus flower closes itself and the bumblebee is caught and it dies. Then we see the example of eyes. There is the example of moth, which everyone must be knowing, the insects, the night insects. How if there is some fire, they'll automatically enter the fire and they automatically kill themselves. So how each and every of our senses can actually pull us to something which is miserable, which can lead to misery. And these are just the example of animals which have just one senses active. How we see like these, we see the example of the tongue, we saw the fish, the ears, we saw the deer, eyes, we saw the moth, and then we saw these bees, which are the sense of smell. How just there even one sense is so prominent that can lead them to a miserable condition or that can lead them to some difficulty. Now, but in our case, if we analyze, all our senses are so strong. All our senses are so strong and all our senses are active. And they can pull us here and there. So it just compared like senses are like the 6 wives. Like a person enters a house and he's captured by the 6 wives. And everyone is pulling, like, come here, come to my room, come to my room. Everyone is pulling the person by hands, lengths, just like that. And now the person is perplexed, person is confused what actually to do. Similarly, these senses, just like we saw these animals where one of the senses was active and they were so much, that led them to misery. In our case, all our senses are so active and all are just pulling us like that. Basically, this example is to understand how our senses pull us in different directions. And that actually leads to our death of our spiritual knowledge. Or that actually we lose the purpose of our life. We see, and that we see in a practical example, how our eyes crave for something, our ears are always craving for something, our tongue is always craving for something. And many times we know this may not be good for us, this may not be healthy for us, it may lead us to some problems in the future, it may lead us to disease, but yet we are not able to control them. Because these senses are very active and they are so strong that it's actually very difficult to control. It's no doubt even in the Bhagavad Gita, that's why Krishna gives this knowledge. So here how we see like this knowledge that was spoken so long ago, 5,000 years ago, there was some principles that are still the same. The senses, to control the senses were difficult even at that time and it is difficult even now. Now someone may ask, so if this is so difficult, then what is the solution to this? So first we'll try to see why do we actually need to control the senses, what is the problem? We saw the examples of these animals, but then even we have the urge to satisfy our senses. So someone may ask, what is the problem? Okay, let me go, let me satisfy my senses, whatever I want to do, let me do. What is the problem? Why to stop? Why to unnecessarily put some barricade or some unnecessary, like artificial stop or artificial restraint? When I desire something, I'll do and I'll please myself. So here the Bhagavad Gita talks the basic things about we being spiritual entities. As we discussed earlier, that we are not, this is the basic teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, that we are not this body, we are spirit souls. And spirit soul is eternal. The body can perish, the body can grow old, the body can die, because body is just a temporary thing. But the soul is eternal. Now just imagine, if we want to satisfy something, if we want to satisfy something temporary, if we do some things, if we try to satisfy some things, it might give us some little satisfaction here and there. It might, if we satisfy those cravings, it might satisfy us for some time. But in the longer run, it always leads to some misery. Because we are looking for some permanent satisfaction. We are looking for some permanent happiness. And this is a general question if I ask any one of you that how much happiness are we looking for and for how much time? So if someone says, okay, if I ask like, are we looking for this much happiness? Are we looking for this much happiness? Or are we looking for this much happiness? Everyone will say, we are looking for unlimited happiness and not all times. No one in this world will say that I don't want happiness. I am happy with this much happiness. Let there be so less happiness or more. Everyone wants happiness and everyone wants eternal, everlasting happiness. Why is it so? That is the symptom. That's how we can understand we are this soul, because it's the desire of the soul. The body is impermanent. It can't give us that eternal happiness, but because we are the spirit souls, we desire that permanent happiness. And now if we analyze in a different way, that how much distress we want. Now let's say we ask this general question, okay, how much distress we want? Who wants so much distress? Who wants this much? Who wants this much? Everyone will say, no, we want this much. We want zero distress. We don't want distress to come in our life at all. Because that is again the hankering of the soul. That's how we can understand practically and very logically that how we are different from this body. Because the body is subject to distresses, body is subject to happiness, that is temporary. But the soul desires permanent happiness. Soul doesn't desire distress, and that is the nature of the soul. That is what is given in the scriptures also, that it's always blissful, it's always happy, but because it is covered by this body, it experiences various kinds of distresses. So as we talked about this thing, that what we are losing if we are trying to satisfy our senses, what we are losing. So it's very interesting. First, let's try to analyze that can we actually satisfy the senses. So if we see in the course of the later verses, that in the Bhagavad Gita it's given like satisfying our senses is like adding the fuel to the fire. Someone says, okay, let me do those cravings, let me satisfy my cravings and I'll get satisfied one day. But everyone knows by experience that this is never going to happen. It's like you put some fire, you keep on adding fuel and you say one day the fire will extinguish. That will never happen, right? It will keep on increasing. Similarly, the scriptures also compare it to an itch, the satisfying of the senses to a itch tendency. Like sometimes we are feeling to itch, we want to itch, and we try to think that this will satisfy us. And then we'll get the feeling to itch more, and until it starts bleeding. But we'll never get satisfied. Similarly, the senses, we think that we'll just satisfy the cravings and we'll become satisfied, we'll become peaceful. That will never happen. And if we analyze, we'll become more and more agitated. The mind will become more and more uncontrolled. And that's why we say that we are not peaceful. People having everything, people in this world having all the kinds of possession they can have, even they say that they are not happy. Why? Because even though they have all the facilities to satisfy all their senses, they can get a big house, nice car, all the things that people need in this world, they can get, the people who are rich, people who are that well off. But still they are not satisfied because the senses, we cannot ever satisfy the senses. Rather, the mind will become more and more agitated. And this is a practical experience even we see when we See in some families, or we see in some higher rich families, they are never satisfied. Externally, it may look that they are satisfied in their life, they are full, they have all the things. But when we analyze deeply, we'll see how their mind is constantly peace, not at peace. How their mind is constantly anxiety, constantly agitated. How they're taking sleeping pills to it. This is a common, if you read about many people, they can't sleep at night. They have everything in their life, they have luxurious house, they have nice villas, everything, but they can't even peacefully sleep at night. Because they don't understand that these senses can't be satisfied like this by satisfying, rather it is adding fuel to the fire. So now we understood that why actually there is a need to control the senses, because we are spiritual beings, and because the actual purpose of life is not to satisfy, but actual purpose of the life is to get out of the cycle of birth and death. Actual purpose is to avoid the repeated birth and death, and to actually go out and go back to our actual position, or the eternal position. That is why we see the senses can never be satisfied. Now in this purport we saw how Prabhupada gave the example of two great sages. He gave the example of Vishwamitra, who was actually deep in meditation, and we read about him. So he was in meditation for 60,000 years. He was trying to control his senses, he was trying to artificially restrain, but that didn't work. He was also led into sense enjoyment. His meditation was broken. Just like the example, some other examples we see of Lord Shiva's example is given, and many such examples of people trying to artificially restrain, but they are not able to do. Now the examples we are giving, these are not some Tom, Dick and Harry, not some general people of this world. These are very great sages, people who have knowledge, people who have high amount of intelligence, and at the same time people who have willpower. No normal person can sit for so many years, do meditate or something, unless he has the proper intelligence and proper willpower. They are putting their endeavor. They know that this is the right thing. They are putting the entire endeavor into it, and they are also discerning from the negative things. But yet we see they are not able to control the senses. So why is it so? So Prabhupada in this purport amazingly explains, and even in the previous purport we saw, because they are not engaging in a higher taste. Because they have not found out that there is something higher to it. They are just trying to artificially restrain themselves. And that never works. Because the desire is always there. The things we always feel, even if we in our life see that we try to artificially restrain from something, that craving remains. We always feel we are being deprived of something. If someone tries to stop us from something, we always feel, oh, I'm not getting this happiness. I'm being deprived of such thing. Just like in practical, we see the example of alcoholic. We ask him to stop, avoid this alcohol. He may artificially do that. He may think, okay, this is not good for my health, this is not good for my family. But then in a mind, that thought of enjoyment will always be there. That this was giving me enjoyment, I am just trying to restrain, but this pleasure I am not getting. So until a person from internally feels that this pleasure is not the highest pleasure and he can get some higher taste, he's not getting deprived from something, rather he's been giving something higher. Then he can actually restrain from the senses. Then he can actually avoid some sinful activities or avoid engaging all the senses in sense enjoyment. So here we see there are two things we talk about. One, as I talk about, being witless. Wit means the intelligence. So these people, as we talk of these sages, they were not witless. They have all the intelligence. They were discerning from these things. And one is the willless, that whenever we take some resolutions, either we say, okay, how can I, whenever we say take some resolution to do something nice, and then we break that. So two thoughts come in our mind. One is that how can I be so dumb? How can I be so foolish to do this? Even if I know that is not wrong, but I did it. So it's possible we might not be having the intelligence. But let's say we know that it is incorrect. Our intelligence is there that this is not correct for us. Second thing is willless, that we don't have the correct endeavor, we don't have the willpower to actually sustain. How I'm so deep into it that now I can't stop myself. But now imagine a situation when a person has the willpower, when a person has the correct intelligence, like these examples, and yet he is not able to control, yet he is not able to refrain. Now why does that happen? So the example, just like that, we take the example of a soldier. Like let's say there is some unarmed soldier standing, he has the full strength, he has the full endeavor, he has full willpower to fight. But then the opposing enemy is well armed, nicely armed, so many soldiers coming and attacking him. Now he may know everything, he may have the willpower, he may have the determination, he may have the intelligence, but it won't help, right? Unless he has the weapons, unless he has the necessary required things that he needs to defeat them, he won't be able to sustain. Similarly, we see that apart from having the wits, apart from having the endeavor, apart from discerning, we also need to have something higher, some higher focus on some divine consciousness or focus on something higher. If that is not there, then we won't be able to artificially restrain ourselves. So now that, and when that thing is there, when we actually focus on something higher, when we focus our consciousness on something greater, a greater goal, that actually acts as a shield that we automatically stop ourselves from doing something wrong or doing something, because we know that that won't give us that much satisfaction which something higher can give us. That's why we say that a person who experiences spiritual bliss, who even experiences a little taste of spiritual bliss, he automatically loses his taste for anything material. This is many times Prabhupada repeats this in his purports in the Bhagavad Gita, that there is no special endeavor required to stop something, but automatically if we start practicing spirituality, we'll experience something, we'll experience a bliss, and automatically our taste for some lower things will go away. We won't ever even feel that there is a need to, we are getting deprived of something or there is a need to enjoy those. Automatically our taste will reduce. So now we'll see that how to protect. So we discussed about how senses can pull us into different activities. Now how actually to protect ourselves, how to protect or how to avoid these things. So one is by staying alert. We have to be always conscious whatever activities we are doing. Because sometimes senses might trick us. They may appear that they are very decent, they are very docile, they are under our control. But actually they are very fickle and forceful. Any time they can pull us. So we have to be always vigilant, we have to be vigilant whatever activities we are doing, whatever things we are engaging ourselves in. We always have to be careful. But now someone may ask that, okay, so that means do we always have to live in this fear, or do we always have to be so much vigilant always in our life? That is not possible. That somehow is never possible. No one can be all 24 hours ever vigilant, ever stopping himself for these things. So the answer is no. We do not actually need to live in this fear, or we do not need to be always vigilant. Why? So Prabhupada says in the purport, he says very amazing thing, that when we focus on something bigger, when we actually focus on something higher, all our worldly pleasures, automatically the taste for those worldly pleasure goes down. And that is what we say about spirituality, about practicing spirituality. When we actually practice, when we experience some bliss, all our taste for lower things go down. And that is the best medicine, best cure for this. Artificially avoiding something, artificially trying to do something won't help. But if we are engaged in something higher, if we are engaged in something better, that can actually stop us, that can actually make us, fill us with that conviction not to do something lower or not to do something abominable. And that's why I say that that's why we say, the Bhagavad Gita says that the highest reality is the Supreme Lord Krishna. And that's why we say about engaging ourselves or engaging our senses in the service of the Lord. Engaging all our senses, engaging different body parts in the service of the Lord. And that way the senses can actually be controlled. Just like the example of a poison, like a fangless snake. A snake whose poisonous teeth have been removed. Then it becomes harmless. Similarly, our senses may be very harmful. Senses may be pulling us in directions here and there. But if we actually engage the senses in the service of the Lord, they automatically become harmless and they automatically become poisonless. And then there is no need to worry, no need to fear. So we have to engage, we have to remember, in the short, I'll just summarize. So one thing is we always have to be cautious. Whatever activities we are doing, whatever things we are doing, we always have to be diligent. But at the same time, that always won't help. Also, we need to engage in something higher, engage our consciousness in something spiritual. That way we'll be purified and we'll get that self-satisfaction we are looking for. The senses are looking for satisfaction, the mind is looking for satisfaction, but we see we are never satisfied. That will come only when we engage ourselves in something higher. And there is this amazing example that is giving us, at the end of the purport was giving us Maharaj Amrish. So this is a very amazing pastime, amazing story in the scripture. So Maharaj Amrish was a ruler, he was a king. And he was fasting on Ekadashi. So even today is Ekadashi, by the way. So he was also fasting on one Ekadashi. And the next day, that is Dwadashi, he was about to break his fast. So now if we see, there is when we break our fast, so there is a paran time. There is a fixed time in which we have to break our fast. If we are fasting from grains, then we take grains in those time and we break the fast. If we are fasting, someone does Nirjala Ekadashi without water, so he takes some water and he breaks the fast. So people on the different levels do different kinds of fasting based on their health, based on whatever their capacity is. So Maharaj Amrish, very interestingly, he was doing Nirjala Ekadashi, he was fasting without water. And the paran time had come, the time had come when he had to break his fast. And that time, surprisingly, Durvasa Muni shows up. And now we know Durvasa Muni, so he always wants to pick up quarrel, he is always angry, he always, many times we see he always curses people, at the slightest agitation he'll curse someone. So here he unnecessarily picks up a quarrel. So we'll see what happens here. Now Durvasa Muni arrives at the scene with many of his disciples and he says that he's hungry, he wants to take something. And he says that he'll just go take a bath and he'll come back and Maharaj Amrish should prepare something nice for him. So now that Durvasa Muni leaves from that place and Maharaj Amrish is waiting. Maharaj Amrish is waiting when he'll come back or when he'll feed him and he prepares something whatever is needed. But at the same time that Paran time was getting over. The time for breaking the Ekadashi was getting over. So in Vedic culture, it's a tradition that if some guest comes, we don't take food before him. We don't take something, we first feed the guest and then we feed ourselves. But here Maharaj Amrish knew that tradition. At the same time, he had to break his fast because the fast needs to be broken in that specific time. So then he consulted with other Brahmanas, he consulted with some superiors and they told him, okay, you can take little water and you can break your fast. That way you won't be taking something grains, you won't be taking something, you won't be disrespecting a guest. At the same time, your fast would be broken, your fast would be complete. So he took a sip of water and surprisingly at the same time, Durvasa Muni shows up. So this is how like a suspense. So Durvasa Muni shows up at the same time and then he gets very angry. So basically actually he came for this purpose to pick up a quarrel with Maharaj Amrish. So he shows up at that time and he just gets angry, he shouts that how can you do this, how can you disrespect me, before feeding me you are taking water, you are taking something. Even though Maharaj Amrish had no intention to disrespect Durvasa Muni, he just wanted to break his fast. But then Durvasa Muni picked up a quarrel, he curses him. He curses and immediately a demon comes out, he creates a demon. So that's what in past people could create demons. So that a demon comes out from him and then he is about to kill Maharaj Amrish. And now this demon is approaching, but at the same time we see the behavior of Maharaj Amrish. So Maharaj Amrish was a great devotee. He was a person, as we talked about, engaging our senses. He's the perfect example of this. He was a person who could engage all his senses in the service of the Lord, and a person who can do this is a very great person. He's the tolerant person. He can tolerate anything. So even though Durvasa Muni unnecessarily chastised him, unnecessarily did all this to him, he was silent, he was tolerant. He was just silent, standing there, and his mind was completely absorbed in the thoughts of the Lord. He wasn't concerned. And now when some person is in such a place, some person is in such a situation, some person is so absorbed, then the Lord takes tension. The devotee may be free from anxiety, but if such a person is in so much absorbed in the thoughts, then the Lord takes tension for such a person. And that's why Lord himself sent the Sudarshan Chakra and they came to kill that demon. And we see how the Sudarshan Chakra came to protect Maharaj Amrish. And first that demon was killed and then it ran after, the Sudarshan ran after Durvasa Muni. And now Durvasa Muni was running for his life, running here and there. Even though he was a great yogi, great mystic, Maharaj Amrish had no such power. He was just a great devotee, just absorbed in the thoughts of the Lord. But that Sudarshan Chakra now we see was running after the same thing, the demon which Durvasa Muni had created to kill Maharaj Amrish. Now the Lord even killed the demon and now Durvasa Muni had to run for his life. And later on we see a big pastime where he runs here and there, he approaches many people and finally he comes and begs forgiveness from Maharaj Amrish, who forgives him and then his life is saved. So here we see how an amazing example of how a person who is a great devotee or whose senses are engaged, neither he'll get agitated on all sin. Basically what we can learn from this example is how not to get agitated. Even in the face of problems, even in the face of troubles, like we see these days we see like recession is going on, many companies are firing employees. People who are spiritual practitioners, they know these things will come. One or the other day, some days will may be very nice for us, we'll have a very high time, we'll have a very blissful time. And some days will be low for us, we'll get some bad news, we'll get some shocking news. But a person who's practicing spirituality, he can remain satisfied, he can remain tolerant in all the circumstances. And that's what we see in the past time, that even when the demon was coming to kill Maharaj Amrish, he was satisfied. He didn't care, he was not concerned. And similarly now, we can just analyze what this ISKCON movement created by Srila Prabhupada, how it has established all these things. How Srila Prabhupada amazingly transformed so many people, amazingly started this movement in the West, and which spread to all parts of the world, and how he actually transformed all the people. So he used the same technique. He didn't use anything else, but the same technique that people want to engage their senses, and he just told them where to engage the senses. Just like putting an old wine in a new bottle. He presented these Vedic traditions, everything was there, but it was never so glamorous. And Srila Prabhupada created this movement just to set up, so that people can have a nice experience, and then they can practice all these things very easily, without having to forcefully do something. And that's why we say, like people, to Srila Prabhupada used to say that people have this urge of satisfying their eyes. They want to see something nice, they want to see something beautiful. And he used to say, so you dress the deities nicely. And that's why you see in all the ISKCON temples where there are deities, they're so nicely dressed, so beautifully dressed that Prabhupada says, if you want to see something nice, see the deities. Engage your mind in seeing the deities and you'll automatically lose the taste for seeing anything else. Similarly, how we see the ears. So how melodious, how now is Kirtan in every ISKCON temple it's going on. So people automatically, Prabhupada instilled all this movement, created this movement, just that people come here, listen to the Kirtans, engage in seeing the deities of the Lord, and they'll automatically lose taste for anything which is not good for them and anything which is abominable. And similarly, when we talk about the tongue. So how Prabhupada mercifully said that if Prabhupada knew that everyone has the tendency to eat, everyone wants to satisfy his tongue. And this is actually the most difficult sense to control. So Prabhupada just said, okay, whatever you want to eat, eat. I mean, obviously under some restrictions, no meat eating, there was that basic restriction. But apart from that, whatever you want to take, you take. But take it as prasad. Just take whatever you want, but offer it to the Lord and take. And that's why this is only exclusively in ISKCON that everything, you'll see pizza prasad, burger prasad. You won't find this anywhere else because Prabhupada, people had that tendency to take. People won't be, if they are artificially stopped to take something nice, they won't be able to do that. So Prabhupada said, you have the tendency, take something nice, but why not just offer it to the Lord and take? That way, not only our senses will be satisfied, but we will also be spiritually nourished. We'll also get the satisfaction, and with time when we start practicing spirituality, we'll get that bliss that automatically our taste for lower things will reduce. So we see how this verse which talks about how our senses can pull us in different directions and how we need to engage our senses in something nice. And Prabhupada created this movement just for this thing. So that people come here, they engage their senses, they engage all their senses in something which they are able to, something which is palatable to them, something which is nice to them. And they'll automatically lose the taste for whatever is lower. So this is something we should be always grateful to Prabhupada, and we should realize how amazing this movement has been created, how these different aspects of spiritual life are created. And if we actually practice them, then we'll not to artificially restrain from something. We'll never need to artificially stop something. Rather, we just need to engage in these things and automatically our lower taste will go away. So I think I'll stop here. Hare Krishna. So if anyone has some doubts, some clarifications, some feedback, they can. Yeah.
Thank you for the class.